Here we go.
Oh yeah, now we have a loading bar. Okay.
Hang on, hang on. Gonna make sure that we're visible. Sweet, we are.
Okay. It's not coming up for some reason. Hello. Okay. Can they hear us yet? Ah, here we go.
Yes, I have us muted.
Awesome. All right, I'm going to mute the actual screen. I just want to watch the chat. All right. Okay. Are we going?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, hello everyone live or who have tuned in to watch the stream, friends, family, hopefully new friends. Thank you so much for being here. This is Blood, Bones, and Brushes, Art and the Body. This is the second in a 4-part lecture series. So first, before we begin, as we gather here today, we would like to recognize that the Puget Sound is on the traditional territories of the Coast Salish people, and we acknowledge the history of dispossession and the forced removal of Indigenous nations that preceded colonization. We currently occupy the stolen land of the Puyallup tribe, who have been the caretakers of this land and sea since time immemorial. This is the first, not the last step in our commitment to the ongoing fight for justice for Indigenous populations. Yes, okay, so this event, Blood, Bones, and Brushes, Art in the Body, is dedicated to elevating the voices of queer, non-binary, transgender, chronically ill, fat, and disabled artists, and any and all intersectionality between. This event is the first of 4, like I said. Each event is dedicated to a single artist, and today we have Sophie Marie. So this event is brought to you through a collaboration between the Art Temple Studio and the Daphne's Performance Project, run by myself, Anna Nesheva, and also Sophie. Founded in 2022, Art Temple Studio was envisioned as a studio that centered the disabled experience and cultivated collaboration with other disabled artists. Inspired by a near complete lack of queer disabled stories in mainstream media, we wanted to make a place to channel our projects and to make art directly for and with our community. At the Temple, the values of imagination, access, community, and education are paramount. The Daphne's Performance Project was founded in 2018 as a loose collection of queer dancers by the lovely Sophie Marie Schatz, who over the last 4 years, the collective has created created 8 short dance films and several live shows throughout Western Washington. In January 2023, the group incorporated into a nonprofit dance company, so that's very exciting. And our mission is to support queer and disabled dancers, creating accessible spaces to work in dance professionally. Our work focuses on the weird and the wonderful aspects of folklore, queerness, and disability. So as a last note, if you enjoy this event, either in person or online, we are accepting donations. If you are capable and want to, if you don't, that's totally fine. For this event, we accept cash, check, and Venmo payments. And if that's not your thing for any reason, that's no problem. Please enjoy, watch anyways. As a final note, we would like to thank Crescent Moon Gifts for providing this space and for being so communicative, and would also like to give a special thanks to Ray Neshbanara, whose contributions help fund our artists so that we can pay our speakers. Yes. Okay, well, I am now going to turn it over to Sophie, and I'll let you introduce yourself. I know it's in your thing, and yeah.
So I'm Sophie. Before we start, I'm going to give a few content warnings. We are going to be discussing both, we're going to be discussing body horror and its link to disability and queer rep in film, and then how I personally use that as inspiration for my dance work. Because of that, we are going to be showing a few images of body horror, nothing too graphic or realistic. There will be discussion most likely of death, pain, potentially ableism, and queer phobia. I also just included all kinds of violence in case there's any specific film questions that folks have. All of these films deal with things that are unseemly. So first off, who am I? I'm Sophie. These are me, myself and my dear friend and collaborator Simone, and then two of my dancers for my company. So I have been dancing pretty much my whole life. I'm classically trained in ballet and modern dance. I professionally work in modern dance and postmodern dance, if you want to get technical about it. Since I've been dancing my whole life, I also haven't been dealing. Your head is in the way.
Sorry, I was trying to get out of the way for the stream
Snuggle.
and then I
Snuggle with me, you're
got in the
fine.
way of everyone else.
I now as an adult deal with chronic pain from an injury that came about from dance when I was about 13 that makes walking pretty painful. Because of that, I have had to sort of reevaluate my outlook and experience of dance, and I've become very invested in the disability community since the beginning of the pandemic. So that's why I'm talking about this. I'm also an avid horror fan, kind of my whole life. We're going to be talking, I'll talk a little bit more about the kinds of horror that we'll be getting into soon. Yeah, that's me. So we're going to talk about body horror. I'm going to give a brief definition of that. There are two kinds of camps of body horror. The first that we will not be talking about is degradation body horror. So that could be anything from Saw, Hostel, one of my personal favorites, Seven, films that usually focus highly on the body being harmed in a way to cause pain. We're going to be talking about transformation body horror. So that could be anything from vampires, zombies, Frankenstein. It's taking the body of either a human or an animal and creating and turning it into something that no longer resembles its original form.
I love it.
The reason that we're talking about this and disability is, and also queerness, this is a form of horror that in the last, I would say 40 years has become very populated by queer and disabled artists. It's something that a lot of us find catharsis in dealing with and exploring the changes that happen to our own bodies, the queer phobia that folks might experience in their daily lives can be sort of exercised through these films. These are not movies we'll be talking about, but these are excellent, I would say, queer adjacent body horror films that if you are up for it, please check them out. They are delightful. Yeah. Oh, really quick. Another reason that I specifically am very fond of this genre is that I think it speaks to not just the exploration of, oh, my body went from one state to another state, but it can also really speak to how visceral that experience is and how at times painful it is and confusing it can be. Yeah, I'll talk some more about the in-depth stuff here in a second. So we're going to start. The way that we're going to go through this is we're going to look at some films that I find really not inspirational, but yeah, inspirational from my own work. Talk about how they relate to disability or queerness, and then we'll talk about some work of mine that deals with similar topics. So we're going to start with, I think, the most recognizable film on this list, John Carpenter's The Thing, released in 1982. This is a film that takes place in Antarctica. It is about a group of scientists who stumble upon an alien creature that slowly begins to take over their bodies. It does it one by one. Each of the characters don't know whether or not they are the thing until that creature is provoked. And when it is provoked, it transforms their bodies into these sort of larger than life, over the top monsters. This starling guy is my favorite and least favorite monster. Immediately after this shot, his head falls off and becomes a giant spider. It's a very,
That's who I want to be when I grow up.
You should. It's a very campy film. It's pretty gross. It is probably next to Halloween, John Carpenter's most famous work. And the reason I want to talk about The Thing is because I think that this movie speaks a lot to the confusion and the fear that can come from knowing that your body is changing and knowing that your body has the potential for change, whether or not that is aging or suddenly you're getting pain in places you don't really know where it's coming from or why. That sort of process that a lot of disabled people go through, who weren't born disabled, where suddenly you can't do the things you always thought you could. Suddenly, maybe even people that you love are going to look at you a little bit differently because you can't interact with them in the same ways. And there's a lot of like pain and anxiety that comes with that. And this is a film filled with sort of paranoia about, oh my God, what is my body going to do next? Am I the thing? And in the end, the answer is
Yes.
yes.
Yes,
Yes,
they
you are the thing. Yeah. So, I'm going to talk about one series that I did long time ago called the OCD series. And this, so I also, alongside having chronic pain, have had OCD my entire life. And this is a disease where pretty much you can develop new loops, new obsessions, new compulsions at any time. I have had various physical compulsions my whole life, and sometimes those change. They come and they flux. I can go 6 months without a certain compulsion, and then one day I have to do this thing a certain number of times, or my home will burn down. And so for me, by the time I made this series in 2019, I was already a longtime fan of the thing. And really sort of, this was a great way. The way that we framed this was it was 4 different dance pieces, all filmed in my home with different dancers. And each of the dancers created movements based on a compulsion that I had developed while living in that home. So I don't remember what all of them were. It's been a while, and I don't actually think I have all of the compulsions that I did at this time.
Yeah,
they've changed a lot in the last 4 or 5 years. Yeah. I'm realizing I kind of left this up for some questions. Is there anything you would like me to touch on?
Oh,
Any sort of examples?
well, I mean, I did have comments
Yeah,
that
please
I
do.
was just gonna say even until the absolute end, but
No.
no. Yeah, well, so this understanding of like body horror as losing control over the self and it behaving in ways that are unexpected and at least in the stories, like often hurtling you towards like pain,
Yeah.
injury, or death.
Yes.
And that obviously this is a concept, a sensation that really resonates with disabled people because we're going through the same thing. And that is like a valid sensation. The only thing that I was kind of curious about, and this might be something that you actually get into later, but that for me, like the next step of like recognizing that state of like, oh, like my body is changing underneath me and I can't stop it, is sort of embracing the monstrous again and reclaiming the monster.
Yes.
And that it's like not necessarily this evil thing, but that it's a just a different state of being. And I wanted, and I know that your work does tackle that. And it's like,
yes, I feel like a lot of the examples, especially The Thing, in particular, are examples of that hurtling towards doom, where the end is very nihilistic.
Yeah.
Spoilers for a film that's 40 years old, no one survived. It is a film that is the ending is quite famous for the fact that it leaves 2 characters sitting next to each other. Neither of them know if they or the other one is the thing, sitting in the ice. And that is how it ends. It's not a film that has much uplift.
What do you mean?
What? Yeah, there's no hope for these characters.
That's like my ideal.
Yeah, we will get to a specific film at the end that I think is what I call a disability masterpiece. That is a lot more just because your body might be messed up or changing doesn't make it the monster.
Yes.
Whereas in The Thing, it very much is the monster.
And that might just be, for the OCD series, like that was the still state you were in.
Yeah,
that you were still reckoning with that.
I have always had OCD. It's something that I have dealt with my whole life. College and this sort of period of time was the time where I kind of got a language for what OCD meant. How it functions in other people, realizing that a lot of things I thought were just like normal ways that your brain functions was actually a part of OCD. And it was a time, this is probably one of my darker series, where there is no catharsis at the end. It is just representation of the sensation. Just saying, hey, this doesn't feel good. Make a dance out. Yeah. There's a dance. Yeah, so let's move on next to, oh, no, don't play that.
Play it.
No,
Watch the whole thing.
no. Go back. Go back. There we, no.
No.
Go. Okay,
Boom.
now we're going to talk about another 80s film
My favorite.
that I love by one of my favorite directors, David Cronenberg. This is 1986, The Fly. It is both of these films are remakes of 1950s films. I really love this one because at the core of this film, it is a romance between these two beautiful characters. Basic plot synopsis: we have Dr. Jeff Goldblum, who is creating a what's the word? Not transportation, teleportation machine. And it is successful, except that he transports himself, which basically disintegrates his body and cells and puts them back together in a different place. He transports himself with a fly. So his DNA makes him slowly turn into a giant humanoid fly. The character's name is Seth Brundle. This character is canonically called the Brundle Fly. He's delightful, and this is probably, I might say, the grossest movie on the list, for a lot less, like, the Thing is gross because people turn into like double head creatures, whereas this, you get to watch him do fly behaviors like puking on his food and then eating it. It's not, yeah.
Okay.
But during this, he and Gina Davis's character have met, they've fallen in love, they're in a committed relationship, and then he basically pushes her away due to the transformation into this grotesque creature. And I really like this because I think it speaks a lot to the fact that when you become disabled, not only are you relearning how to deal with your body, the people around you are relearning how to deal with the new you with your body. If you need a caretaker, like that is something that a partner might have to become. And it really sort of changes all relationship from the most intimate all the way out. Again, this is a film that is not something where it goes, you and your disabled partner can live happily ever after.
It's gonna be great.
No, this is a film where she shoots him in the head. It's
Also, I mean,
sometimes you got to do it.
oh God.
And I think that this is also probably the saddest film. This is a film that has a lot of deep grief in it. The Gina Davis's character, whose name I'm completely forgetting, has a lot of love for Seth all the way until the end. But she makes the choice to kill him at his own behest. It is not something that she necessarily wants to do. It is also a part of the film that they're having a child together, and there's a lot of anxiety about the fact that like her partner cannot help her parent this child. And I think that that's just, it's a
Question, is it a fly baby?
it is not ever shown. She has a nightmare. There's a nightmare scene where she gives birth to a maggot. But that is not canon. Oh no.
Okay.
Where David Cronenberg has a cameo as the doctor. It's very fun. Yeah. So then we are going to go. This is, I would say, a little bit, this piece is less overtly nihilistic or anything like that, and is a little bit more tangentially related. So this is obviously called Changeling. I made this in the pandemic. And this was specifically dealing with Irish changeling lore, which is specifically in Ireland, the changeling was either a child or an adult who suddenly became ill. So they either were what we would probably think of as having symptoms of neurodivergency or physical disability. It was something that was very feared, especially for the several hundred years pre and post Christianization. Yeah. To have your child or a loved one become a changeling.
People don't like disabled.
They don't like disabled people. It's not great. The way to get rid of it, like to bring back your human loved one, would be to kill the changeling. So there are a lot. Great. There's a lot of historical cases of like child murder and spousal abuse that came out of this belief. The last person to be killed because they were a changeling was in the 1890s. So very, very recent. Her husband actually went to jail for it, which is one of the few cases where that actually happened.
Yeah, we're going with held accountable.
Yes. It's a very, very sad case. So this was a piece where basically in the dance, I start in more human movement. I go behind the tree and I come out and I am a creature of some sort. So for me, it was a little bit more about dealing with one, nature. That's a whole other conversation about nature and spookiness, but this idea that you can, who you are can flip on a dime, and that's going to completely change all of your interactions.
Yeah. No, and I mean, like, you know, that I love changeling lore.
It's great.
And it's fascinating, and it's, you know, and I think that it, you know, again, it really resonates with the disabled narratives, because you can sort of look nearly the same on the outside and be like transformed internally and be almost a different person.
The
like,
people around you can recognize
and the people can
transformation.
recognize it, and yet there are still so many parts that are like almost like the same that it is very like disturbing, and it gets into that, you know, sort of uncanny valley.
Oh, fully.
Yeah. And I mean, so is it the piece that was inspired by The Fly, or was dealing with a lot of the same?
I don't have anything like that is specifically The Fly related. Sadly, I would love to do something like that where the dancer just becomes a pile of mush by the end.
I do love that. I think that could be your next like priority.
Next piece, sweet. Oh no. There we go. Okay, this is the one and only film I will ask my audience not to watch. This is Brandon Cronenberg, the son of David Cronenberg, Possessor. This is an amazing film. And it is also probably the most mean-spirited film in this lineup. Not even going to get into a ton of the nitty-gritties, but the basic premise is that this is a indeterminate future, sort of dystopian world, where our main character is an assassin who takes over the bodies of loved ones of their intended victims, so that when they commit the assassination, there's no evidence tying it back to her or her organization. It's just tied back to a family member or a loved one. You see several of these murders, but basically what happens is she goes on a routine killing.
Killing.
Yeah. And the person whose body she is inhabiting starts to regain consciousness. And it is a battle sort of between him desiring control of his body, not having it. This is also a film that deals a lot with queerness, in the fact that it is a woman inside of a man's body. And there's this sort of idea of, there are some pretty explicit sex scenes that are going back and forth between who is in control, what does that mean for like consent and sexuality. It's a very interesting film. The main, I would say, thing that I got from this is also you get to see her in his body going to work and just doing a menial job that is draining the life out of him. And it just sort of, you get this large sense of dread as her in his body is just living this life of exhaustion. And then it gets to be culminated and he gets to be framed for murder. So it's a really, yes, this is also a very cheerful, not nihilistic at all film. The ending is peachy keen, there are no children killed. This film, I think, that ties a lot more directly into a work that I was actually in the process of working on when I saw this film. And that is This Apply of Tomorrow.
I love this piece.
Yay! Kat, you guys came to the live version of this. So I spent 2 years of the pandemic working with my dear friend, Simone. If you ever get a chance or in Seattle and you see Simone Sands' work, she's wonderful. I always want to give her a shout out. And so we started with a 12-minute dance film that then we got a really amazing grant by the city of Seattle to create a full hour-length work based on this 12 minutes. It was a very time-consuming process. And the basic idea that we came towards this project was, how do you recreate movement that has the same sensations as after working a day of manual labor? So I was working a job at a warehouse at that time. I would come home after 8 hours of work, and then I would have a 2 to 3 hour dance rehearsal. So I was very tired. She was also working full time and then coming to rehearsals. And so basically the way that we crafted this movement was not what is something that looks like, oh, I'm tired, but how do I make myself tired? By the end of the hour-long piece that we only performed once, thank God, we neither of us got out of bed the next day. Like I actually couldn't walk the following day. We had danced on concrete. It was probably the most physically exhausting work I've ever done.
Kind of chilly too.
It was very cold. We were lucky that we had
Yeah.
like a ton of padding underneath our costumes, so we were very sweaty. Everyone else got to freeze while they watched us. But we also approached this very specifically as this kind of exhaustion is something that everyone who works is going to experience at some point. It's the beauty of being in the labor force. But we were also coming at it with, I actually had to leave that job at the warehouse because it got to the point where I was in so much pain at the end of every week that I would just spend my weekends in bed. And I wasn't seeing friends, I wasn't doing stuff. And I'm also a queer person, and she was also really engaging with this as being a Black woman working a brand new job in the beginning of a pandemic. There was a lot of identity crossover with the kind of not just physical exhaustion, but like emotional exhaustion that came from being in the workforce.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I have so many thoughts. Can I
Yes,
give them to you?
please.
Okay, well, so the first with like the idea of exhaustion, and that like exhaustion is a physical, like a destructive force, that it is like the symptoms of exhaustion are your body like actually breaking down, like muscle soreness.
Your
and
body telling you you have to rest.
you have to rest.
Or you're done.
And that like being a form of body horror by itself,
Yes.
that it is like an actual act of destruction. And then I also, kind of tying it back to possession, the idea of either exhaustion or of like a foreign entity, that is occupying your body, this being like a very kind of dissociative experience, and that and body dysmorphia is what it kind of recalls for me, with like queer transness.
Well, and I think that's something that especially like queer workers deal with, especially if you're not out at your job. I know, and I have friends in my life who worked at like coffee shops at the beginning of the pandemic who had to make sure that they don't use their proper pronouns, don't come off as too gay because they have public facing jobs. We had Wayne last time for the talk, who is an amazing trans man who has talked about the fact that he is really lucky, at least to me, to have a job that is affirming. And in Texas, that's not always the case. Yeah. And so that's like another level of, if you have to go to a job that is already physically exhausting, but you have to play a character the whole time.
Yeah. And isn't it just lovely that like you made this piece like after work, that it's about exhaustion, and you were like physically exhausting yourself to make it.
That's why there's a lot of floor work in this piece.
A
lot of us rolling on the ground because I did not want to stand anymore. There was also sections of us laying on the wall because we were like, this is way more comfortable than being in like a full body pose. Yeah. This is probably my crowning achievement of my career.
This piece is great.
Thank you. It was very strange the day after it ended because we were like, this is 2 years of work, and it's done. Never to happen again. I'm glad. I was very tired actually. Great. Okay, here is one of my personal favorite movies. So this is Leigh Whannell's Upgrade from 2018. Leigh Whannell is the most well-known for writing the original Saw. He also wrote the original Insidious, and what's the other one? There's another really famous series. No, I'm thinking of James Wan, never mind. He did not do The Conjuring. So Leigh Whannell's really great. His probably most famous directorial film is his remake of The Invisible Man that came out 2 years later. That is also an excellent film. Upgrade is my personal favorite because it blends the few things I love about sci-fi with really great action sequences. This is slightly more of an action film that turns into a horror film. Yeah. So this is about our main character, whose name I don't remember, but it is played by Logan Marshall Green, who in every film has a different face. He never looks the same in any movie he's in. He's very great. So this film basically takes place after his character has suffered through an assault that has left his wife dead and him paralyzed from the neck down. He is then provided with this sort of microchip that allows for his brainstem to talk to the rest of his body so he can move. First off, I want to give kudos to Logan Marshall Green for the change in physicality from the beginning of the film until when he is disabled and then when he is using this chip. They're all three different physicalities. It's really beautiful to watch.
Cool.
Ultimately, as this is a horror film, the microchip gains sentience and begins using his body for violence. The violence in this film is over the top. There's a couple head explosions, which I am a fan of. It like borders on camp, but takes itself very seriously. Which is a really,
but we love that.
We love it's a very fun mix of like silliness and like growing dread as the film progresses. Again, this film does end with the main character losing full control of his body, and it is fully given over to this microchip. You don't know what it's gonna do, but it's already killed some people.
Yeah.
So the thing I really love about this is, one, the main character is disabled. Canonically, he's a disabled man. There are, I think, some elements of the politics to talk about the fact that he only has power when he's able-bodied. And that is, I think, a much deeper discussion on disability in film in general than necessarily this movie by itself. But I do think that something that's really fascinating about this film is he does not own the microchip.
Yeah.
You know, Elon Musk-esque billionaire does. And there is a scene where the main character, the billionaire who has given him this tech, realizes that he's not necessarily using it for good, and he turns it on. And suddenly the main character is rendered fully paralyzed again. And so I think this is a movie where it really shows you that like even medical aid or mobility aids are not always something that belong to disabled people. Everything from like the fact that like just living on disability payments can be ended by the government at any time. There are stipulations to those payments. The fact that insurance companies can deny you access to wheelchairs, canes, any sorts of things like that. They can deny you life-saving surgeries if they don't believe that it's necessary.
And people die.
And people die. Yeah. This is a movie that it really displays that in a way that is, you get to have fun with the fact that he's going after the people who have killed his wife and disabled him, which is kind of delightful to watch them get murdered. But you don't get any of the catharsis from that because he's not in control of his body and it can be taken away at any time. This movie, I don't actually think has a ton to do with my own work, but I do think it has a ton to say about disability and body horror. But yeah, any questions about this movie before I go on to the next dance piece?
Well, one thing that I thought that just occurred to me that you might, like to expand on was the difference between like upgrade and possession, both being where there is an original entity, that another one
overtakes,
manifests in. But the difference with upgrade being that like the chip gains sentience, but it didn't really choose to be in that body. So it's sort of born. And so whose body is it anymore?
It is made, he also makes he consents to having it put into his body, whereas in Possessor, that is not something that happens.
Yes.
Yeah, and the way that this one, whereas the sort of the transfer of the body in Possessor is a very like it's all done in stop motion where the body literally melts and is regenerated. It's very uncanny and disturbing to watch. This film is actually just shown as a medical procedure. It's still
Okay.
gory, but it's not like, ooh, gross. It's just like, oh, I have to look at surgery now. Which I think is also just an interesting difference in display, that he ostensibly wants this. He chooses it, and it is still used against him in the end. Spoiler, it doesn't go well for it.
Yeah.
None of these movies so far have happy endings.
Yeah, so actually, this is a really good question
Great.
from the chat. But this is from Rainesh Banara, but they are curious about the difference in storytelling between movies that unintentionally feature aspects of disability versus movies that intentionally display aspects of disability.
We could do a whole talk.
Like as a metaphor, or
yeah, we could do a whole talk on that.
And maybe we should.
And maybe we should. Because I think that's a really hard thing to answer succinctly. I think both tend to display disability as a negative.
Yeah, no, and that's exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah, is that it is something, even if it's not on purpose, or a film like Upgrade where it is on purpose, it is something the characters never get out of the grief phase of being disabled. They never go on to learn how to live and survive in the world as disabled people. They usually get murdered.
Yeah, and it is displayed as like this inexorable path toward death. You know, that as soon as you are disabled, you have started down the road.
We again will come to a film where that is not the case, and I will say please watch it, but that's for the end of this. Yeah, I want to move on to some dance stuff. Okay, so this piece is much more recent, and this one I think is a little bit closer in style to something like the ideas of the thing. So this is a piece that I did last year, actually performed in this room, which is very fun, called The Goddess and the Spider. It is based on the Greek myth of Athena and Arachne, which, if you know anything about that myth, basically Arachne is a human. She's a very talented weaver. She boasts that she is a better weaver than the goddess Athena, who, if you, classic mistake. If you know anything about Athena, she's vindictive. So she basically challenges Arachne to a duel of weaving, which is very.
I do that every Saturday,
that's like
actually
85-year-old at the retirement home, like battling with their weaving.
Yeah.
And through the story, Arachne does this beautiful work, and it's, you know, of a human scene. Athena does a work that displays the life of the gods on Olympus. It basically drives Arachne mad because that is not something humans are supposed to see. She goes and she kills herself by hanging herself in the woods. And Athena comes to her and, realizing, I didn't mean to kill this mortal, I just liked the competition, changes Arachne into a spider so she can weave forever. And
so generous.
The Greek gods are really rough sometimes. So this was a piece that had three of us. Specifically, I played Athena, my dear dancer right here, V, played Arachne, and then Ruthie, who's in the back, was the muse. We played this a little bit queerer than the original retelling. Ruthie chose to be the muse of erotic poetry, eratu. So we played it almost as if the duel was a little bit of a flirtation that goes too far. But we do have a specific scene of Arachne dying and becoming a spider, which is one of the images I had very far back was in rehearsal. And we played that, at least we tried to play that as much more of a horrific event, that she does not choose to become this spider. Like, she actually chose to end her own life. And is forced to become something that she doesn't. Now she's trapped like that for all of eternity. It's kind of a harsh sentence for just being really good at your job. Yeah, that one I'm really, really proud of. And we spent a long time working with V on how to make a difference between their movement as Arachne as a human and their movement as Arachne as a spider. And how does that, because we weren't able to like give them big old spider legs and, you know, very low budget work. So we had to do that purely with their physicality. Yeah. Any questions on these two?
No, I don't believe so, but I have some really good ones for you.
Sweet, cool. Then we're gonna talk about Crimes of the Future, another film by David Cronenberg. In case anyone knew, I love David Cronenberg. This is a film that I think is a disability masterpiece. This came out 2 years ago.
This is the disability masterpiece. Okay.
This is a perfect. This movie is very complicated. There's like 3 storylines happening all at once. We're going to focus on the main storyline, which features Viggo Mortensen, who lives. Yeah, my partner and my mom are both like, oh, he's hot in this movie too. He lives in a world where humans have evolved to, well, not all humans, some humans have evolved to this point where their bodies keep growing new organs. And in the film, these characters who are growing new organs are not technically classified as humans because they no longer fit into human anatomical structures. He is a character who is regenerating internal organs, which cause him a ton of pain. You see this delightful bug bed that he's in. This is specifically a bed designed to keep him not in pain while he sleeps. There's some other very Cronenbergian bug-looking mobility aids that he has through the film.
I wish I had.
They're crazy looking. But his job is that he is a performance artist who his art is surgically removing these organs. So it's a very like outlandish sort of dystopian film. There's some questions on whether or not this art form is even legal, is even something that you should be engaging with. It's very taboo. It's very sexualized. There's a whole subplot where Kristen Stewart just wants to jump his bones. It's very funny. I mean, it's Viggo Mortensen. You can't judge her. He's very beautiful. I, as a diehard fan of The Lord of the Rings, really loved seeing Aragorn play a disabled character.
Yeah.
I thought that was like really beautiful.
And canonically disabled too. Like it's not a metaphor.
No, this film is dealing with the metaphor about came out right around the time Roe v. Wade was overturned, and David Cronenberg is also a staunch trans supporter. We love him for that. He's like 80 years old and still being the coolest. And so he did say that those were elements of the film as well, because the horror is no longer, a lot of David Cronenberg's early films are, oh God, the body is gross, sex is gross, people are gross. It's bad to have a body. Whereas this film is, even if your body is doing things that cause you pain, that maybe leave you in a place where you don't actually know what your legal distinction is anymore or where you fall in the state, that is not horrific. You're still a person. What's horrific is the state itself regulating you.
Yeah.
And you do also see this character with all the ears. He's in one scene, but he's a delight. He is a dancer in the film, and I was like, I want to be. That's what I want to be. Yeah, and so this is a film where there's lots of characters who have other sort of mutations, who face criminal charges simply because their body has evolved in a way that doesn't qualify them as human any longer.
Yeah.
And that's Crimes of the Future.
And that, I mean, we talked about this in our conversation.
Watch
Yeah. But like sort of the layers of influence between like, is disability something that is innate to our body?
it.
Or is it something that like our bodies just exist and the disability comes through the way that like we cannot interact with the world because it has, you know, these barriers.
The personal model versus the social
personal versus the social. And it seems like in this film, it firmly falls in like, or not firmly even, it's actually both.
Because it's very clear that Viggo Mortensen's character is in
chronic pain. Yeah.
He does a lot of things to get out of pain. Like the surgery scenes are not, they are played as being orgasmic because it's a David Cronenberg film, they're going to be horny. But it is also, what's the word I'm looking for? It is a support, like it is removing the thing that is causing him pain before another one grows. So he is a character who is in pain, but he's also a character who is denied access because of his pain and because of these sort of mutations. Even though in every other regard, he looks like a normal dude. He doesn't have ears all over his body. He's just got stuff growing inside of him. there is a scene later where he gets a very fun and horny body nod. Uh, because again, it's David Cronenberg.
We love.
We love. Yeah. You have any other questions on this before we
No.
talk? So I'm going to talk a little bit about my future work and where I'm going with that. So I've got a few pieces coming up. I'm working right now with my dance company on a piece specifically. It's less about disability, much more about queerness. It is a look at identity and what happens when your identity is in different venues. So that could be all of us are neurodivergent. I have OCD. We've got a couple dancers with ADHD. So we have like one section is like, how does your identity feel when you're overstimulated or you're in a loop or something like that? Versus when you're feeling great and your brain isn't on fire. We also have a section where we're putting on drag personas and dancing as someone else versus dancing as ourselves. I'm very excited. I actually have confirmed that piece is going to have 3 premieres. We're going to be showing it at King's Books here in Tacoma in late August. Stonewall Youth Organization in Olympia, which is a queer youth org, and then at Gay City, Seattle in sometime in August. We haven't decided that one yet, so I'm very excited for that piece. And then we have Vampire, a strange fiction dance, which will be performed here at Crescent Moon, which I think is really funny. The city of Tacoma itself is paying me to put on this very weird and campy piece.
I don't know why they wouldn't though.
I'm very excited.
We should center vampire.
We should. So this work is going to be 4 different sections utilizing vampire iconography from different sort of time periods to explore various topics. So we're going to be starting the work with Eastern European vampire lore, which is more zombie-esque, my personal favorite form of vampires. And so we're going to be, I think that one is probably going to be most tied to disability as we are literally falling apart as Umpirs did in like Russian folklore and whatnot. Then we're going to have a section that is just going to be fun and campy, which is going to be inspired by the blood rave scene from Blade. If anyone has seen Blade. I only recently saw it and that scene is delightful. We're also going to have a queer gothic scene, which will be to them presenting dancers enacting the sensual dance of the vampire and the human. We're also going to be having a similar sort of animalistic piece, which will be based off of the vampires from 30 Days of Night, which is a very gross comic series and a very fun early 2000s film if you're ever looking for something that's very edgy.
I mean,
always. And then we're gonna finish the piece with a solo based on Nosferatu. That is gonna be danced by an absolutely amazing trans dancer who I love. Yeah,
excellent.
well, that's what I've got going on.
All right. Well, so I do want to open it up for questions. But maybe before we jump into that, I just have one question that I really wanted you to answer. You are, I mean, so we have gone through sort of the conceptual, parts of your dances. But as a disabled dancer, how do you run your production and your rehearsal? Because that's a really different process. And
yeah, that's a really great answer and one that I'm still figuring out the answer to. So my company is all dancers with various disabilities. And those are like, we have one dancer with fibromyalgia. So they deal with flare-ups and chronic physical pain. We have another dancer with a heart condition. So they just can't do certain amounts of like strenuous activity. So a lot of it is conversation, is we get into the space, whether it's virtual, we do virtual because all of us, due to the fact that we're disabled in some way, are very, we know that social distancing is something that we still have to do, especially because we have one of the dancers is super immunocompromised. So sometimes it's virtual, sometimes it's in person. And it usually starts with a check-in of like, okay, how are you emotionally doing? But also like, how is your body feeling? Is there movement you physically cannot do today? Is there movement that you are going, I may never be able to do? Or I can't go in and be like, okay, I want you to do like 12 flips for me. What? I have to sort of check in and give them choreography and be like, okay, how do we have to modify this?
Yeah.
So it's, one, I am relying on the dancers to know how to communicate their needs to me.
Yeah, I
And
mean-
vice versa, which is not always like a perfect system. Sometimes you need to have other systems in place, but we're still kind of working on it. A lot of it is just dialogue.
Mhm.
Yeah.
But dialogue's important. you
It's
know,
really
I mean,
important.
yeah.
And it's not something that happens enough in dance rehearsal.
What do you mean?
Yeah.
Okay, excellent. Well, I say we open it up to either the chat and then, but before we close out the chat, I do want you to give it your like contact info and everything for where to find Sophie's work and to follow all these lovely dance projects.
You can find my work on either YouTube, this very YouTube channel that the stream is happening on. All of our events are also on our website, which is just dasbeastperformanceproject.com.
We always choose fun names.
Yes, Das Beast is the German spelling, so it's DASBIEST. And then Instagram is just Das Beast Performance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Thank you.
All right. Do we have any questions? Oh, yes.
Yeah, so one thing that I'm mind specifically going back to upgrade is kind of part of with how we're seeing the character's movement change. It's also reflected in the camera. So, like,
Yes.
So the camera itself is like locked in
It's
on
very
his body, and like you can feel the motorics of him moving. I was curious what are kind of other examples of how the camera is used in the film? that
Yes.
kind
And would you
of gives
actually,
a good
Yeah.
parallel to something like how it is in Upgrade.
would you repeat the question?
Yeah. So in the film Upgrade, I actually forgot to mention this. The first, I would say 15-ish minutes, the camera, it focuses on the main character in a very traditional style of just shooting each character and moving with them. Every time that the main character has the chip on, the way that they shot it is they put a iPhone in the main actor's back pocket, and the camera itself was on like a big crane, and it was attached through Bluetooth to the phone, so that whenever he moved, it actually shoots from his spine. It's very cool. There's moments where like if he twists to like punch someone, the camera goes with it. And he is always sort of center frame. It's very, very cool and gives a sort of uncanny idea. He also moves much more rigid. So
Yeah.
he no longer looks like he's moving like a normal human being. And I don't know of other films that utilize camera work to display physicality other than maybe zombie films. I would say something like Train to Busan, where this is not about disability, but when the horde comes, you get wide angles, you get very fast tracking instead of very close, cramped character drama.
Yeah.
Or maybe something like that 28 Days Later, where
Yes.
the photography is sped up.
Yeah.
and
That's
stuff
the
like
frame rate is sped up
Yeah.
in that film.
So this actually segues beautifully into
Yeah.
into a question that I had, but
Great.
so how does the addition of film to your work change
Ooh.
the dance and the art from like just a more traditional performance piece to like a dance film?
That is a little bit more technical and logistical. So I started getting into film on dance on film when I was still living in New England because I didn't have enough money to rent performance spaces. So it was purely I could make it cheaply and fast.
And that's valid.
That
like
is-
I
yeah. Same sort of with the pandemic, performance spaces were unavailable.
Mhm.
So making dance on film was a way to still be making work where the audience never has to come into contact with the dancers. It also really helps when you're in rehearsals on Zoom, where if I'm looking at, like, say, Simone and I did a duet, all of our rehearsals were virtual. We had like 2 or 3 rehearsals that were in person before we filmed and then before we did the live
Yeah.
version. I could see her body how a camera would see her body
Yes.
in a way that when it's just us, it's hard to imagine how the camera would frame you if I'm not looking at you through the camera. Now that I'm back into more in-person rehearsals, that has to be a lot more of a like structured thought process.
Yeah.
which I'm still getting used to. Though it does make the rehearsal process a lot easier because you don't have to rehearse everything linearly.
This is true.
It allows for sections where we go, okay, here's the moment where we can cut, we can take a break for a day, regain like comfort in our bodies and come back to film the rest.
Yeah.
So I would say logistically, it's way nicer than
Mhm.
doing live performance. Live
Yeah.
performance is
And,
brutal.
You know, I could even say that it's more accessible.
It's way more
Like,
accessible because I can put this up on YouTube for free.
Mhm.
No one,
Yeah.
I don't have to charge anyone a ticket price to cover our overhead
Try.
costs.
No.
Yeah.
Yeah. Excellent.
But I'm interested in some of your thoughts on, if you have any examples of like intersections of like queerness and disabledness and like this horror setting of like these two things that sort of like in, or at least often engendered this disgust of
Yeah.
of society.
Oh, absolute deviant.
Oh,
Yes.
I would say,
Oh, will you repeat the
oh yeah,
question too?
the question was, where could I link, or not link, but like give examples of the intersection of disability and queerness in horror? I would say almost all horror.
So vampires.
Vampires, I would, yeah, are like the go-to. They can be nasty, even when they're sexy, they're nasty. They are always queer coded. Usually in the sense of like sexual deviance and not necessarily like gender play. I mentioned it earlier, the film Titan, which is a French film, deals extensively with gender dysphoria. And the main character is maybe trans. He's also a disgustingly bad human being. And you get to sort of play with, the character isn't bad because they're trans, they're just a bad person.
Bad.
Actually fainted.
Okay, so yes, it is.
That was the first movie I saw post-pandemic, halfway through. And I fainted. And I had to leave. And then I had to like.
I really enjoy that film. It is not for everyone. It is quite the movie. I'm trying to think of other examples. There's, okay, this is a much older example. Nightmare on Elm Street 2.
Oh, the second.
Was famously panned because, so in slasher films, there's a concept called the final girl, who is the lone survivor. And in the original Nightmare on Elm Street, you have,
And she's the only one who's deserving.
she's the only one who's deserving.
Right?
She's
Yes,
usually
everyone else
virginal.
deserves to
Yeah,
die.
there's a whole discourse on the final girl. There's lots of books on it. Please read them. Nightmare on Elm Street 2 had a final boy who was possessed by Freddy Krueger, who has a penetrative weapon. So it was inadvertently very queer coded. Also, it's an 80s camp slasher. So everyone went thinking they were going to get sort of a similar Nightmare on Elm Street. They came away with a queer coded protagonist, which the movie was absolutely panned. It failed in the box office. The main character, the main actor was actually outed as gay because of the film. And it wasn't until about 30 years later that it became kind of like a queer icon film. And it has a very large queer following now, because it was the first time a lead protagonist in the slasher was overtly queer coded. He's very feminine presenting. He does like have a girlfriend, but he also wears like skin tight short shorts the entire time. They knew what they were doing. So if you're looking for a more campy version than Titan, I might recommend that one.
Well, so we have a question from the
Yeah.
chat and I want to include it, but would like the new Chucky like count as the one with the, no, wait, is this the Chucky one?
I'm talking had the non-binary.
The non-binary
Yes.
child.
You're talking about the TV show. I
Okay,
have
yes,
not
yes.
watched the Chucky TV show yet. It
Okay.
is
That seems like it could be like doing
Yeah.
some stuff with bodies
So-
and puppetry and
the Chucky films have always been very queer friendly. Chucky has had a non-binary child since the early 2000s who is also a doll. Like it's the Chucky movies. One of the, I think the best lines that came out of the Chucky TV show was the main character is gay. He comes out to Chucky and Chucky's like, I've got a non-binary kid. He's like, really? And he goes, yeah, I'm not a monster. And it's very fun.
good.
Yeah.
Okay, so the question I want to make sure we get to is this is from Daniel Rowe on the chat. I'm so curious about your process. When you're trying to choreograph a new piece, do you have a theme or film in mind, or do you integrate inspiration along the way? How do you translate other mediums into dance?
I am very high concept, so I always go into rehearsals with not end goal, but like a big idea. So when I went to like the Goddess and the Spider, all I knew is this is my favorite Greek myth. I want to make that a dance piece. And a lot of, I don't usually go in with movement ready. I tend to go in, meet with the dancers, kind of talk about what their ideas, what do they think of when they either read a myth or talk about a type of folklore or whatever the inspiration for the piece is. And from there, we do a lot of like improv and creating phrases based on, okay, let's talk about Athena. Her iconography are owls. And weaponry, like how do you make movement?
How do you make an owl?
That was actually a lot of her movement was
Yeah.
she had like really jerky head motions like an owl
Ooh,
instead of just being a warrior, bringing sort of the creature factor into her versus something like Arachne. Okay, she's a person, but then also how does that person become a spider, but still feel like the same identity? And then we build movement together. I really like to have a very collaborative process. When it comes to actual inspiration, that tends to be something where I'll watch a bunch of movies and I'll be like, hey, this makes me think of this. I'm trying to think of anything specific recently. Oh, I just went and rethought Flashdance with my mom. And there is a really great dance scene in Flashdance. And I went, I'm going to put that into my video project, but it's going to be weird and gay. And the character is going to be wearing bondage gear.
I mean, I wouldn't have it any other way.
It's like hot pink bondage gear.
Oh, yeah.
It's
Mhm.
very cute. So I think it's a little bit more organic. I
Yes.
tend
And
to
deeply collaborative,
Yeah.
it sounds like.
there was a running sort of joke when I was in college that I really wanted to recreate a lift that happens in the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre. That was purely, hey, we need a lift in this moment. What would be cool? And I went, let's watch this scene from TCM. And my dancers went, we can't do that. So yeah, a lot more organic than it might seem.
Yeah, absolutely. No, that's something that I've always really loved about dance in general.
I don't believe in auteur theory on any level. So I will not engage in my rehearsals as if I
Yes.
am the ultimate
The
creator.
dictate, yeah. Yes, absolutely. All right, so I think it's about time that we wrap up. We went just a little bit over, but I was happy that we got all of our questions. So to wrap it up, I just wanted to first say thank you to Sophie, and to everyone who came either in person or who logged on to the stream. And as a final, okay, you don't have to answer this question. It's unhinged. It just like came to me while we were watching. So do not feel pressure. F, Marry, Kill, the Fly, the Thing, or Upgrade.
Okay. That's sort of easy. Marry Brundlefly because he's very caring, and also he's Jeff Goldblum. Kill the Thing.
Kill the Thing.
It's
Okay.
nasty.
Yeah.
F Logan Marshall Green.
All right, next.
Very easy. Yeah.
All right, and with that.